Next on Currents News, holding bishops accountable in sex abuse cases. That's the main topic today at the unprecedented Vatican Sex Abuse Summit. Behind the scenes at the summit, the Pope has been meeting with abuse survivors. One encounter was especially emotional. The Holy Father is changing the rules about Catholic marriages. He's raising the minimum age. Plus, with the Oscars on Sunday, we check in with Net TV's film expert on whether award shows still have impact. The news starts right now.
Because along the way we have failed. We need to seek pardon.
India's Cardinal Oswald Gracias at the historic Vatican Summit on Clerical Sex Abuse. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. Holding bishops accountable top today's agenda as the church fights back against the clerical sex abuse scandals. Catholic leaders from around the world are at the summit. Currents News' Tim Harfman is here to tell us what they've been hearing.
Liz, Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich, a close ally of Pope Francis, explained to his brother bishops the prime purpose for making reforms on accountability.
All mechanisms for reporting allegations of abuse or mishandling of abuse cases against a bishop should be transparent and well known to the faithful.
The American offered a list of 3 key steps in order to make sure bishops are held accountable. First, he wants strict standards for investigating bishops who commit abuse or don't report incidents they know about. Next, he's calling for lay people to ensure the reporting of any allegation made against the clerics is completely transparent. And he wants concrete procedures for bishop accountability to be implemented worldwide. Cupich said there's great urgency for decisive action to be taken immediately, because that's what Catholics are demanding.
They are asking themselves, if church leaders could act with so little care in giving pastoral attention in such obvious cases of a child being sexually molested, does that not reveal how detached they are from us, parents, who treasure our children?
The other main speaker at the summit today was India's Cardinal Oswald Gracias. He was contrite.
We must repent and do so together, collegially, because along the way we have failed. We need to seek pardon.
The Cardinal helped organize the summit and said clerical abuse offends God and the law.
The sexual abuse of minors and other vulnerable people not only breaks divine and ecclesiastical law, but it's also public criminal behavior. Therefore, the Church fully cooperates with civil authorities in these matters to bring justice to survivors and to civil order.
Gracias mirrored Cardinal Cupich's comments about bishops developing better standards for accountability and responsibility, and also talked about meeting with survivors.
I was numbed and could not speak. I could sense the anger, frustration, hurt, helplessness, and bitterness that they felt.
Tomorrow, the bishops will take on the crucial topic of being more open and transparent about incidents of clerical abuse and how to better communicate with Catholics. The summit ends on Sunday with Mass and closing remarks from Pope Francis. Liz?
All right, Tim, thank you very much. Covering the historic Vatican Summit on the scene is national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. He joins us now from Rome. Christopher, always good to see you.
Thanks, Liz. Good to be back with you.
Christopher, India's Cardinal Oswald Gracias had some harsh words to say about sex abuse not being simply a Western problem and how the church has let down survivors. Before we begin, let's listen.
Failure to listen to victims, to take their claims seriously, not extending care and support to victims and their families, giving priority to protecting institutional concerns over and above the care of victims, failing to withdraw abuse from situations that would enable them to abuse other victims.
How are his words received?
Well, as I think the Cardinal's remarks from it sort of lay down a marker that this is certainly a global problem and requires a global solution. I spoke with folks that were in the room yesterday, and of course their comments are off the record, and not for attribution, but there were frank discussions in certain groups where particularly bishops from Asia and Africa were saying this is more of a Western problem, and I think the Cardinal wanted to use his time and his position as a prelate from India to say this is a universal problem and we all have to get on board.
We heard from another Cardinal as well, Cardinal Supich, who outlined a new plan for bishop accountability. What did that entail?
Well, as the Cardinal outlined, sort of a three-stepped process where one, new standards would be sort of set at the episcopal level. So in the United States, new sort of guidelines for all U.S. bishops. And then in cases of allegations against a bishop, the sort of regional bishop would oversee an investigation alongside a review board of lay national experts. And then finally, those cases would be sent to the Vatican for Pope Francis to make a final judgment on.
Very important part of this summit, Christopher, the victims, and some of them from the United States, met with the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich. What was that meeting about?
Well, Liz, this meeting came at the request of these victim survivors who wanted to meet with the State Department, and I'm told that this is the first meeting of its kind where State Department officials actually met with victims about the sexual abuse crisis. The ambassador issued a statement after the meeting saying that it was a powerful meeting. It's something that the President is very concerned about, and that the U.S. State Department applauds Pope Francis's leadership on this issue.
Now, day two of this summit has wrapped up. There is so much to digest, but what's the general mood like in Rome?
Well, as among the survivors, I think there's still a lot of concern that when we get to Sunday, when all this wraps up, that we'll hear strong words, but not any real indication of what action is going to follow. And these survivors really want, if not concrete action on Sunday, they want a timeline of promises to be made and when to expect them. Now, that being said, among those in the room, I'm told they're very hopeful that in these small groups they're having some very honest conversations, calling out one another where they see errors have been made, and demanding change.
Chris, what's next on the summit? What's on the agenda? What should we expect?
Well, tomorrow we'll have another day of experts and small group conversations that will take place throughout the day on Saturday. And this all will kind of reach its crescendo on Sunday when there will be a final mass in which Archbishop Mark Coleridge from Brisbane, Australia will give the closing homily. And then after that, a sort of State of the Union final address from Pope Francis.
All right, Christopher, thank you. As always, good to talk with you.
Thanks, Liz.
And while the bishops are meeting, not far away from the Vatican, abuse survivors are speaking out, offering painful stories of what they endured at the hands of predators. Melissa Butts reports from St. Peter's Square.
Remembering the past. On Summit Day 2, survivors are not speaking about what's going on inside the Summit Hall, but rather the memories that forever haunt their past. Horrific stories of abuse being told in Rome. These victims gathered with photos of themselves as children to share their abuse stories. For many, the emotions couldn't be contained as memories and anger were vocalized on Friday afternoon.
Nobody from the Vatican reached out. Nobody from the Archdiocese of my country reached out to talk to me or anyone or even help me.
There were victims from New Zealand, Poland, Switzerland, Italy, and Ireland, just to name a few.
And this is the priest who abused me for 12 years. And I did not realize until only 6 years ago, when I started to bring my disclosure forward and go into therapy, that I had been singled out as his pet lamb. Lambs led to the slaughter.
Dan Sherwood from the United States says he first shared his story of abuse, which began at age 9, just last week, before coming to Rome.
When he was abusing me, he always said that this is what a father does for his son. I never had a dad, so I didn't know.
Now these survivors support each other through the tears and hugs. It was an emotional meeting that sought to unite past experiences, with the justice being sought today as bishops from all over the world are here in Rome.
It's so hard to go through.
The group also encourages other survivors around the world to courageously share their stories, so sexual abuse will remain a part of the past. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
Thank you, Melissa. Behind the scenes, the Pope is meeting with survivors in Rome for the summit. Tonight, we're learning details of one encounter that was visibly emotional. An abuse survivor from Poland met the Holy Father and Francis kissed his hand. Then the man, Marek Malavchek, showed the Pope a childhood photo of when he was being abused. Marek later spoke about the meeting.
I was able to say, I'm a child abuse victim from Poland. I was holding the photo of myself as a teenager. The Pope took my hand in his hands. He looked at me, and I could see he was teary-eyed.
Survivors like Marek say they relive their trauma every time they share their stories and hope this historic meeting brings about change. Tonight, well-known abuse survivor Marie Collins is saying progress to stop abuse is happening in the U.S. and elsewhere, but not everywhere.
In many other countries around the world, children are being abused by members of the church this very minute, and nothing is being done to stop it. And that is what is frustrating for somebody like myself who've been campaigning for 20 years.
Marie served on the Pope's commission to protect minors until she quit, saying she was butting up against Vatican resistance to reform. Still ahead in this newscast, Executive Director of America Magazine, Father Sam Sawyer, will be here. I'll talk to the Jesuit about what's happened so far at the Vatican summit. Tonight, Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley is telling the Vatican he wants to see the results of an investigation into any cover-up of the Theodore McCarrick scandal. O'Malley said knowing what happened is, quote, very important when it comes to possible wrongdoing both in the U.S. and the Vatican. It's claimed McCarrick's sexual abuses were known within the hierarchy, but the ex-cardinal was still able to rise in power. Newly leaked documents allegedly from the Vatican are raising questions tonight about Argentinian Bishop Gustavo Zanqueta. The bishop headed up a diocese in the Pope's homeland before he stepped down, claiming health issues. He was handpicked by Francis for a top Vatican job in 2017. Then accusations of sexual misconduct became public, and the Vatican said it was unaware. Now an Argentinian newspaper is reporting that the Pope was shown evidence of wrongdoing by Zanqueta, convinced the pontiff it was fake. The Pope is changing the minimum age for Catholic marriages. Archbishop Charles Scicluna broke the news at a press conference during the Vatican summit.
The Pope is proposing that there is a change in canon law and that the age for both males and females would be both 16, because at the moment it's 14 for girls and 16 for boys.
Scicluna said that's the standard in most places and now becomes universal. There's a lot more news headed your way. Another development in the Jussie Smollett case, and it affects his empire character. A deadline tomorrow in Venezuela. An army of volunteers is ready to break through blockades and deliver relief supplies. As the bishops meet in Rome, a top Jesuit has advice for fellow Jesuit Pope Francis and what he should say when the Vatican summit wraps up. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@thesalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Updating our top story for you, the historic Vatican summit of the world's bishops and the Pope to stop clerical sex abuse. At today's meeting, Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago saying the church needs transparency.
All mechanisms for reporting allegations of abuse or mishandling of abuse cases against a bishop should be transparent and well known to the faithful.
Also leading today's discussion, India's Cardinal Oswald Gracia speaking about the need for justice and healing for survivors as part of our team coverage of the groundbreaking summit. And to further explain what its impact will be, we are joined by Father Sam Sawyer, Executive Editor at America Magazine. Father Sawyer, thank you so much for being with us.
Very good to be here.
Pleasure to talk to you. So earlier, Our correspondents Christopher White and Tim Harfman, they reported that Cardinal Cupich wants 3 things for this summit. I'm going to read them for you. Standards for investigating bishops, reporting allegations to ensure transparency, and implementing concrete procedures. All that said, they all ultimately point to accountability. Lay people have wanted this for a very long time. First step or all talk?
I think it is a first step. And in fact, I would say that in many places it is a 3rd, 4th, or 5th step. Certainly in the United States, where we've been dealing with this question of abuse in the church in a significant way since 2002, and the first time that the abuse crisis came to national attention here. I mean, the American church has done quite a lot with the Dallas Charter and our zero tolerance standards, which isn't to say that we're done. We have plenty left to do, but we've made significant strides. I think one of the things that I'm hopeful for from this summit is that some of the reforms that have already happened in the American church can be broadened and adopted more internationally in places that still haven't even begun to deal with this.
Another point of conversation that we've all been exploring is Pope Francis unveiling 21 points of reflection, steps he believes that the church should take to tackle this crisis. You've seen the list. Which of these stand out most to you?
One that certainly jumps out to me is the standard about procedures for holding bishops accountable, because I think this is what we've all felt as one of the missing pieces in the American response, certainly, and especially since the revelations of the Pennsylvania grand jury report and the other parts of this crisis that have unfolded in the U.S. over the last 6 months or so, that when a bishop commits abuse himself, as we see in the case of former Cardinal and former Archbishop McCarrick, who's now been laicized, or when a bishop has failed to implement the standards to protect children, how is that bishop held accountable? And even when Pope Francis is willing to act on it, as he has with McCarrick, often there's questions about what procedures were followed or how transparent the whole process was. So I think if that standard really putting teeth to the procedures that the church has and making it clear to the faithful how bishops are being held accountable for their governance, I think that would be a hugely important outcome.
Now, Pope Francis is supposed to speak this weekend. What might he tell his audience? Or better yet, what should he tell his audience? And should the words zero tolerance be part of that conversation?
I think it might help if the words zero tolerance are part of that conversation. I think what people need to hear is that Pope Francis understands how painful it's been to watch the church and the bishops respond to this so slowly. And if he can help people understand that he gets that he knows that we're waiting and that we need a response now because the church is in pain and wounded, I think that will help.
Father Sawyer, we're going to have to leave it there, but I really appreciate your perspective and insight. Thank you so much. We're going to have you back. Definitely.
Thank you. I'd enjoy that.
The two forces fighting to rule Venezuela could clash this Saturday. That's the deadline set for getting humanitarian aid into the country. Strongman Nicolas Maduro is vowing to blockade the relief. Self-proclaimed President Juan Guaido is enlisting an army of volunteers to get it through. A grandmother says she's ready to sacrifice her life.
Estoy dispuesta a dar hasta la vida por mi hijo, por mis nietos, para dejarle un mejor país a todos los jóvenes y a todos los niños que están creciendo.
The volunteers say they'd welcome U.S. troops in Venezuela if military force becomes necessary to confront Maduro. A new development tonight in the Jussie Smollett case. The TV actor is being cut out of Empire, at least for now, following Smollett's arrest yesterday on a felony charge in connection with staging a fake hate crime. Empire's producers decided to eliminate his character from the last 2 episodes this season. Smollett is free on bond and insists he's innocent. Still to come on Currents News, ahead of Sunday's Oscars, Net TV's movie expert David DeCerto talks with me about films and faith. And could the image appearing on a home represent the Virgin Mary? Some in the neighborhood think it does. We'll be right back. We are in entertainment awards season, and this Sunday, one of the biggest, the Oscars. Here to talk about the nominated films Catholics should see, David Certeau, the host of Net TV's Real Faith. David, you don't come by enough. I'm always so happy to have you.
And I always love talking movies with you.
So let's talk movies, David. Co-host of Real Faith for years. You've reviewed these nominated films from a Catholic perspective. Your favorite this year?
Well, this year's a really interesting mix. There weren't a whole lot of great films, but there were a lot of good films. And one of my favorites of the nominated films was Black Panther. And I say that, you know, it is a superhero film, but I think this film has more cultural importance than just what appears on the screen. First major superhero movie starring, featuring an African-American superhero. And it's not just the star, it's the entire ensemble. It's a major franchise film with an African-American ensemble. And I think that's really important. It allows young African-American children or any children of color to do something that a lot of white kids have always been able to do. Look up at that poster and be inspired by a superhero that looks like them. So that's why I'm rooting for Black Panther.
Good message there. Okay, let's first give this more context. From a Catholic perspective, what exactly does that mean, really quickly?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer simply, but beyond the usual checklists of, containing things that probably aren't appropriate for certain viewers, I think it's really the underlying anthropology. Is a movie suggest redemption? Does it suggest hope? Does it suggest sort of a sacramental, incarnational view of life? Do the things in the film matter? And ultimately, as many papal writings about film have talked about, does it ultimately promote the dignity of the human person?
And like you said, there should be a message too, like you talked about with Black Panther. What is an Oscar season without controversy?
Yes.
Right?
And this one has several.
And this one has several. Golden Globe winner Christian Bale raising eyebrows during the awards ceremony, talking about his inspiration for his role in Vice being Satan. Let's take a listen.
Thank you to Satan for giving me inspiration on how to play this role.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this was tongue-in-cheek, but would this have passed the David Certeau test on Real Faith?
Well, look, first of all, Christian Bale is a very talented actor, but I generally don't go to actors for political advice. What bothers me about this is elected officials are certainly fair game for criticism, but it's when we go from criticism to demonizing. I think it kind of did cross a line, and it reminded me of Abraham Lincoln's famous line about, I'd rather keep my mouth closed and have people think I'm a fool than open it and prove them right.
Words to live by. Any movies that were snubbed that you were stunned?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. My absolute favorite film of the year was Won't You Be My Neighbor? It's a documentary about Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers. Not only was it snubbed in the documentary category, which I think was by far the best documentary, I think it was the best film of the year. It was a film that right up front says, at the heart of everything is love and the lack of, and it was advocating kindness and gentleness, and I think that's so needed in our toxic culture.
Ultimately, do these award shows still have impact?
They mean stuff for people who like award shows. The Oscars is really a big celebration where the industry gets to pat itself on the back. I love movies. There are a lot of people who love movies, so to me it still does.
Best Picture. What's your choice?
Best Picture, it's a two-horse race. It's either going to be Roma or Green Book. On Real Faith, I said Roma 2 weeks ago. It's kind of a toss-up right now. I still think it's going to be Roma.
All right, thank you so much. Some believe they are seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary on the side of a home in Texas. Those who viewed it claim the image appears underneath a porch light. As word spread throughout the neighborhood, believers arrived with candles and rosaries to pray. The homeowners are Betty and Eloy Contreras, and they think it's a sign.
It is like the Holy Spirit shining over the picture and giving us the strength.
I saw it right away, and all I could, say is wow, because being a skeptic, maybe she's sending us a message.
The husband and wife add that even those who are skeptical about the vision should pray anyway. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news, and I hope to see you again next time.